All righty. It says we are live. Hoping everybody can hear me okay. I'm just going to do a double check to make sure it's showing up at least on one feed. Yes, it is. All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And let's see, I can close this, I think. Okay, comments. That's what I want right there. Okay, great. All right, so today I am back with you to talk a little bit more about stress, but today I'm focusing on how to get a little relief. This is actually one of my favorite strategies for stress relief in the moment, right? Because, of course, there's the moment, and then we need long term plans. But this is about being in the moment when we're feeling that stress and what we can do to ease our way so that we can get back on track again. And then later, probably reevaluate and see what else we might need. So I started when I talked about doing this, I shared a story about my mom and my aunt who, when they were teenagers, they had to support my grandmother when she was doing domestic work. So sometimes my grandmother would send them if she couldn't go to a job or she had another job, she had two jobs scheduled, and she would send my mother and or my aunt to do a job for her. So in this one occasion, my aunt is sent to do a job and she gets to this home after a dinner party the night before and opens the door to see that the kitchen is literally what people can now call a hot mess. Stove is dirty, food cooked onto the stove, the pots are dirty, hardened food, dishes full, the sink is full of dishes. And she just looked around at it. And like any of us, when we come into a situation that feels overwhelming, we want to go. Right? Like there's that instant instinct to say, "Let me get out of here." And my aunt looked at it and said, "No way, right? And this little 12-year-old body of mine is going to be able to manage cleaning this stove. This oven is dirty. These dishes. This is." My aunt said, "Goodbye, little house. Goodbye." She left and she went back home. All right. Now you have to know how bad that situation was in order for her to have to be willing to face telling my grandmother that she didn't do a job versus that job, right? So like versus staying and doing it, right? So it had to be really bad if you're willing to go home and tell your mother I couldn't do a job, right? So sometimes that's how it is in a stressful situation. We just want to walk away and say, "This is it. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this. There's too much that's being asked of me here. I can't do this." And I would say probably the last 3 years have given us many more of those. Some of us have had more of those instances of, "This is too much. I can't do this," than we'd like to remember, right? And as I've talked about in this last few weeks, when we're in a stressful situation, we look at it, right? And we say, "All right, do I have what I need to manage this thing? Do I have the resources to manage it?" And if the answer is no, right? Like my aunt, you might say, "I'm not the person for this job." You might just simply be able to say, "I don't have the resources for this. There's somebody better at this. So I'm going to look for who they are." Right. But in some situations, you can't necessarily leave. So, what can you do to center yourself and start to make the most of the resources that you have available to you? What I want to offer you today are four principles to guide you. This one question reset is one of my favorite ways of dealing with stress. And it actually, this process actually came out of me healing from burnout. So, the first principle I want to give to guide you through thinking about what would be a good question to ask yourself. Why questions? Because questions help us reset, right? They just like, we're over here and we're stressed. Ask a question, then you can shift off of the thing and start to think about what else I could do to support myself, right? So the first thing is to just use what I call the wisdom strategy. Now, this can give us a few questions. So wisdom is about knowing what's and using what's in your awareness. It's really about tapping into like what your body is saying to you, what your emotions are letting you know. It's about that. So you can simply ask your question yourself, what is upsetting me, right? Because your body and your emotions and your thoughts are already giving you these signals that you're upset. So, what is upsetting about this situation? It's a way to ground yourself. So, what is upsetting? Knowing what my body is saying to me right now, and you got experience with stress, so you know how your body tells you about certain things. Your body tells you about frustration one way, it might tell you about anger another way, it might tell you about disappointment in a certain way. So just notice, what is upsetting me in this situation. Once you ask yourself that, you can start to slow down, because now you got to focus, what is upsetting me, and if you need, I promise you can actually write answers to these questions, right? So that wisdom strategy of beginning to just notice what's in your awareness and start to use that to help you, right? Ask a question that will help you move to the next thing, to move out of that and start to plan how you're going to handle the situation. The second principle I want to share with you today is what I call rhythm. And rhythm is about noticing how things fit together, right? Right? How things work together. What is the order that's needed here? So, a good question to ask yourself, that you can ask yourself, is what does this situation need? Right? So, for example, in my aunt's situation, she knew that that situation needed more than one person, right? So order, right? Beg- This kind of rhythm, right? Beginning to set a pace, to set an order of how things can go, begins with a question, right? That's what I call the rhythm principle. So rhythm, once we have a rhythm, it's like you learn a dance. Say you learn salsa, right? And once you know the steps, right? You know it's dun 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 dun. You know that rhythm, then you can put in your own flavor. But having the rhythm helps you start the pace, helps you start the order, right? So, what does this situation need is a great question to ask, to start to research, set yourself, to start to find your own inner rhythm again. The third principle I want to share is flexibility, right? And flexibility can be a number of things. It can be reframing a situation, but basically, flexibility is about noticing how you are using your own resources. What are you doing with your resources? Where are you putting your energy? Right. And so you can even ask yourself that, how am I investing my energy in this moment? Am I investing in an old story that I always tell myself when this thing comes up? Or am I actually looking for, oh, this is a new thing and I'm not sure what to do here? Can I trust myself in this situation? Right. So are there other resources I need personally in this moment? What How am I using my resources? How am I using my resources? Notice how you're investing your energy. Remember this, that burnout is full of different kinds of exhaustion. And if we stay in stress too long, it's easy for us to experience physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion. Just to the point that the stress is unresolved and we stay there, so we're depleted. So asking yourself, how am I investing my resources, can be a key question for beginning to reset yourself, to say, oh, I really prefer not to put my resources over here. You can also, in this flexibility strategy, using this strategy, you can ask yourself emotionally, right? What do I need? What is the emotion I need to feel in this moment? Is it confidence? Is it faith? What do I need in this moment? Is it calm? Right? And staying with this idea of resources, another question you can ask yourself to create a sort of sense of flow and shift, which is flexibility, is to ask yourself, how can I make this easy? Or how could this be easy? Or how could I find ease? To focus on where to go towards ease, right? And I would say the last principle that I want to share with you today that is important for being able to reset yourself fairly quickly in a stressful situation. And I'm going to share with you my question, because when I burned out, one of the things I realized was that I'd lost touch with the why behind the work for me, the reason the work mattered to me and why I mattered to the work. So that fulfillment that many people would say is spiritual energy, that sense of purpose for me was gone. I was just doing. I was no longer being me. I was doing a thing. I wasn't being me anymore. So I asked myself, what does this have to do with who I came to the world to be? And that says, if I know who I am, then I can actually look at this situation and start to think, well, in order for this to fit into me being me, I might need to change this. I might need to ask for that resource, or I might actually need to rethink this project, right? So, what does it have to do? Once I start to look at what does this situation I'm in have to do with who I came to the world to be, then I can start to say, oh, okay, I see how this fits with me being more of me in the world. And if I can see that, then I can start to figure out what are the resources I need, right? So the question you ask yourself, the reset, is just to get you refocused so you can now access the brilliance that lies within you to actually start to create change. I'm just going to check if somebody has questions, you can type them in the comments and I should be able to see them over here. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, right? So again, this one question reset is that thing that gets us to ground and to return to where our strengths are so that we can now make a plan that makes the best of our strengths, that makes the best of us taking on what we want to take on in the world, right? That allows us to bring our best to the things that really matter to us in the world, right? So, just a quick review. There are four strategies, and these four strategies can guide the questions that you ask yourself to help you refocus and ground, right? The first strategy is what I call wisdom. So, you want to be in your awareness, and you can simply ask yourself, what is disturbing me in this situation? When you feel that stress come, right? What's disturbing me? What is disturbing about this situation? And you have that, right? Again, I love writing down things, writing. Some people like to talk it into their phone, but I love writing them down because I see it, I feel it come through me, and then I can start to move things around almost like puzzle pieces, right? Second principle is rhythm. Rhythm is about finding an order and also about returning to a rhythm that works for you in your daily life, right? So, how are you going to get there? You got to notice how things are working in how they're fitting, right? What is happening that I'm actually ending up in this stressful situation? Am I stuck in an old story? Am I stuck in a new story, right? What's happening here? So, beginning to ask yourself, what does this situation need? Now you can start, what does it need? Oh, it needs this, it needs this, it needs this to be resolved. Then you can start to think about how do I get those things? Sometimes that means you're not going it alone, you're asking for help. Third principle, flexibility. Flexibility, really the root of it, right? The foundation of flexibility is about being able to notice how you're using your resources. Where are you investing your energy in this moment, right? So you can ask yourself that, how am I investing my energy? You can also ask yourself, right, what would bring me more ease in this situation? How can I move through this with more ease? Because then you start to access your emotional strength, your emotional resources to guide you. And then the last strategy that I offered was connection. Connection is about that sense of your own purpose guiding you, what you want for you to be your guide. So as I mentioned, when I burned out, this was one of the things that helped me heal, was to have this question I asked myself, which is, what does this have to do with who I came to the world to be? I've gotten overwhelmed, I've gotten stressed. Hold up. Have I lost touch with my purpose? Because that's what helped happen to me. I lost touch with my purpose. I burned out, right? So, in order for me to actually navigate stress, one of the things I like to be able to do is to come back to what really matters to me in the work I'm doing and in my relationships, because purpose doesn't really have boundaries. Purpose is not just limited to my career. It's not, right? It's actually in the way I interact with my family, those people who are close to me, in the way I interact with me and how I take care of me. So connection principle is also about how are you continuing to connect with you and to be you rather than just doing all the things all the time, right? So those are my four tips for today, and some reset questions that you can use that match those strategies. I talk about those strategies at length in my book, and I'm also happy to support you if you feel like there's more you need to sort of begin to think about how you can best reset yourself in stressful situations, and maybe how you can even start to create a new way of dealing with stress. Some of my clients come to me and they say, I really, I'm successful, but I don't deal with stress well. So, and we know what that's like, right? We're moving, we're doing all the things, and we're just forgetting some of the strengths and strategies that are in us. They're just buried underneath the stress. And once we start to clear things out, we start to feel more able to access our inner resources, right? So I'm checking for comments and I'm checking for questions. And if you're watching a replay, just put replay in there and type your questions or your comments, and I am happy to come back to you. I'm actually excited to come back to you. Right. So just let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I'm happy to answer them. But if not, we can close up for today. And let's see, this is February. Yeah. So in 2 weeks, actually, that's my mama's birthday, the 8th, in 2 weeks. And I think I'm going to do something around mental health and the kinds of ways, some everyday strategies that I've learned for supporting our mental health, right? Let's see. So what to do when you need when you need daily strategies? Yes. So you have to build what I call your toolkit, and you also have to use what you've known that works for you in the past, right? Now, I tend to be a person who really loves to turn to my spiritual resources. So those resources usually help me get back on track and start to see my way, right? Now, some people, their strength lies in feeling into their body because your body talks to you when you're in a stressful situation, right? So they start feeling into their bodies, and sometimes what happens if they will go and take a walk, or they will go and access, outside, right? Sit with a tree, they can actually start to feel something shift inside of them. And then they start to get some clarity so they can move forward with how they can answer. So when you need daily strategies, right? If you're feeling stressed every day, that means probably you need to like shift. There's some way you need to shift the strategies you're using so you can come to what we call equanimity. Because life can just be crazy, right? Let's just say you have a relative who's sick, right? Or you have a challenge going on in your family, and you have a work situation you're dealing with. So you got a bunch of things going on at one time. So you're facing stressors all the time. What you need then is a way to just be able to say, I can live in a place of equanimity, right? I can live in a place of peace, even as the storm is moving around me, right? And if we think about it, I'm trying to remember one of these nature videos I watched about how the eye of the storm is really where the power comes from. But that's actually also the quietest part of the storm, right? Everything is swirling around the eye. So somehow in this quiet place, in the midst of the storm, is often where we discover where our real power is. I think the other day I was we some other colleagues and I were doing a discussion, and we were talking about how sometimes people can get caught in a conflict. You're in an inner conflict, right? You're caught between yes and no. You want to say no to something, but if you say no to something, you're worried about what's going to happen if you do, right? So often in psychology, we talk about these different kinds of conflicts, approach avoidance, avoidance, avoidance. So you can be caught between two things. Some people call a rock in a hard place. So when you're in a situation like that, where you feel like you're in a rock in a hard place, one of the things you can do is use this flexibility principle. And that flexibility principle says, all right, yes, these things are at conflict, but also there's some complementary process going here. So even at the moment that we feel our most stressed, there's always a place within us that knows our capacity to move through stress. At the moment when we feel like this is way too much, there's also a part of us that knows we know how to handle things. So sometimes we're in the part of the we it's just too much, and we can't see the part that knows how to handle things. So anytime you feel like things are too much, also begin to remember, right? Like, because that's like a seesaw, like the seesaw now, or a teeter totter, people call them. You're leaning too much to one way into what I can't do. But there's a part of you that's been through things before and knows what you can do. Getting to that part is not always easy on your own, but getting support to be able to stay in your resources and move through the challenges and use them to help you grow is something that you can do with more ease when you have a supportive community, a supportive mentor, a supportive coach, a supportive therapist, or a combination of all those things, right? Answer your question? Okay, perfect. Good. Yes, the seesaw feeling, right? And so remember, whatever feeling you have is also registering in your body. And so as you're feeling, more on one side of the seesaw and what that's like, right? It's just like, and you get too heavy, lighten yourself up by noticing and remembering what it's like when you feel a little bit more confident in yourself. That's another way to begin to bring yourself back to balance, right? That's the flexibility principle. Again, if all of your resources are going into thinking about how bad something is, begin to start to think of what's going well and start to notice where you're using your strengths. And you can start to get a little bit more balance. And then you can start to map out a plan for how to deal with whatever specific situation you're in. Right. All right. Thank you for your questions. I appreciate them. All right. So if we are finished with questions today, I am going to see you guys in a couple of weeks, and I'll put out a post, out an event, so you'll know that I'll be here and what I'm talking about next. All right. All right. I'll see you then. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for joining me. All right.